Please do stop me if you can't hear me. I'm getting a note to say that my internet connection is unstable. So I'll spend maybe just a couple of minutes talking about maybe one or two instruments, or at least returnable grant, which is something that we tested out for the first time. So a returnable grant is a simple, like zero interest loan. We give money to someone. They have a moral, not a legal obligation to repay. If they are not able to repay, it's fine. If they are able to repay, that's fantastic. Typically, these were small grant amounts, everything from like $60 to encourage more digitization, to maybe $500, which was or 30,000 rupees, which was critical for them to revive their businesses, invest in some sort of working capital, etc. The terms of reference were very, very flexible. So the way we structured it is, for example, farmers were given a returnable grant to buy seeds and fertilizers during the sowing season, and they repaid it back when they were able to sell the harvest. A street vendor was given the returnable grant to invest in, just buying basic just buying basic inventory, etc., and to resume her business. And then she paid it back in smaller installments on a weekly basis. Women or people who lost their jobs use a returnable grant to get upskilled, find new jobs, and they paid it back through their monthly salaries. So both the inputs and how the repayment was structured was completely customized based on the specific cash flow or the trade that a person actually practiced. The last 2 points were, we really wanted to allow people, and in particular women, to borrow with dignity, right? These were not kind of charitable grants. And they loved the fact that they were receiving money, and then when they paid it back, so they were a beneficiary when they received the money, and when they paid it back, they were a donor, and they were actually helping another similar person like them. And so the sort of pay it forward like approach really worked very well. You'll see some of that getting translated into repayment rates. And the last one that I alluded to earlier was really to also demonstrate that they are very creditworthy. In some cases where people actually needed a loan, which was far bigger than the returnable grants we could offer, we ended up connecting these individuals to NBFCs or MFIs, where they took the loan. The challenge there was twofold. One, that the NBFC didn't want to take the risk, and we offered a first loss default guarantee to back that risk. And in other cases, because interest rates were at 25, 30%, those were not interest rates that people could afford at a time when their own businesses were uncertain. We provided like a interest subsidy. The way it was structured is the following. I'm a borrower. I take hypothetically 10,000 rupees. I have to pay 2,000 rupees as, let's say, interest. Once I pay my third installment, I get 500 rupees. I pay my, let's say, sixth installment, I get another 500 rupees. I pay my ninth installment, I get 500 rupees. I pay my 12th installment, I get another 500 rupees. It does two things. One, it actually encourages good repayment behavior, particularly for a first-time borrower, and there's a cash incentive at like every couple of months. And second, because the money is offered as a grant, while I have to pay back 12,000, in reality, because I have got an additional 2,000 as a grant, I literally only have to pay back the 10,000, right? So works like almost like a zero interest loan, but we've used formal credit markets to actually extend that capital. So just to give you a sense, right, when we started out, we had broadly, three questions. One, will people use it for the right reasons? And, we found that 88% actually used it for regular business inputs, 36% used it for expanding business. Our second question was, will people repay because they don't have a legal obligation to do so? Our farmer cohorts paid back 100%. Beauty entrepreneurs are women who run small salons. As you can imagine, that business hasn't recovered. And yet 96% of them were actually able to pay back the money. The 73% is a sort of a misleading number because this data is from March. From March to now, we're actually in a moratorium or a pay as you go or pay what you can kind of mode. So it's not fully accurate, but we'll have a better sense in the next few months in terms of how people are able to repay. Since March, many, many more cohorts have been added. And so we'll have much more robust data, but at least sort of first cut indication is that a lot of these cohorts are absolutely willing to repay money. The other kind of fear that we had going in was, this is the middle of a pandemic, people are going through all kinds of horrible things at home and at work. On top of that, you're expecting people to understand new instruments, have these delivered over a mobile phone through a technology interface by some strange organizations. And, would people really, A, even understand it, and B, how would they find the process, right? So 89% said it was easy or very easy. 92% felt like they had all of the information they needed to be able to participate, and 98% were very satisfied with how the entire process was conducted. So in addition to sort of figuring out whether we're seeing impact on business, whether we're seeing repayments in terms of, is this the right instrument to use? And also, is this actually people friendly and is it women friendly? I think in most cases, the answer was a pretty strong yes. Any questions so far? I am covering a lot of material.
If anybody has any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead.
I have a question, Vinita, here. Though I come from healthcare, I was wondering what kind of grants do you have for, say, digital inclusion in education? Do you have any?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's sort of where it's coming up, which is, for example, right now, and we wanted to test out the returnable grant for 6 months before we say, is it relevant for other places? So, for example, now we're talking to a bunch of people to say, can we create like a returnable grant instrument for parents to pay fees, or for parents to actually buy devices? Or, for example, women who become like edupreneurs or who are offering remedial education to buy devices, go door to door, and actually help students cope up with whatever they're missing in school, right? Similarly, we're seeing a returnable grant being used for a health savings, health insurance product. We're seeing a returnable grant most likely going to be used for things like TB, because two things happen. One, even if you're seeking treatment from the government, there are a lot of out-of-pocket expenses that people can't afford. And second, we find that particularly men who are in, let's say, working on construction sites, mining sites, etc., who are at a disproportionate risk of TB, when they contract the disease, and by the time they get better, their bodies are no longer able to perform the same job role that they were doing earlier, right? And therefore, a returnable grant is a nice way for them to not just pay expenses, but also get upskilled, reskilled, and find other jobs. So what we are looking to do right now is to work with a wide variety of nonprofit partners to see that can the concept of a returnable grant work in skilling or healthcare or education. And so that's sort of what the big emphasis is. And we're constantly looking for ideas.
Okay, thank you. I'll message you a few questions, yeah.
So just moving on, in addition to Revive, we set up another alliance called the IPA. It was supported by Unilever, the Gates Foundation, and RBL Bank. And this was also important for us because in the first case, all 5 co-funders were actually bilaterals, multilaterals, or global foundations. And we hadn't really seen corporate interest in supporting platforms. And so in some sense, it was important for us to see if companies step up and understand the value of supporting secretariats or platform creators. And so Unilever and RBL Bank very quickly kind of stepped up. We started out with a modest ambition of saying we'll support 500,000 people. We got to 1.9 million. That's where we are at today. I think the number will be much higher. We collaborated very, very quickly on Revive with a large number of knowledge partners, including JPAL, but also in IPA, where Dr. Nachiket Moore, who's a former head of the Gates Foundation, JPAL, IDFC Institute, UNICEF, etc. So we said, look, we can't afford to make mistakes. And so anyone and everyone who can provide direction, we were sort of willing to listen to them and be guided by them, right? We also wanted to work in close partnership with the government from the get-go, but we were clear that we wanted corporate champions, we wanted companies to take responsibility for what was happening, to their stakeholders in their communities. And we also wanted to ensure that anything that we do is delivered quickly but effectively by best-in-class partners. And they were both nonprofit partners, but also large for-profit companies. So broadly, 1.5 million people reached through healthcare, 400,000 through sanitation. Just this concept of sort of sanitation workers is important. So before we started the IPA, which was last year at this time, there were a handful of people funding sanitation workers. And even in the course of the last 9 to 10 months, we've now had about 17 companies funding sanitation workers, which was very important for us because this is a target audience that has been consistently, I'm not saying ignored, but not even considered by the private sector, right? And so one of the things we were keen to do is to, elevate the sanitation worker at the same level as a healthcare worker. And so we called both of them India's protectors. One is more visible and in your face, and the other one's, cleaning your streets every single day and is also keeping us safe, right? So how we talk about them, how we position them, how we invest in them needed to change. And second, we really wanted to build a strong pipeline of corporate commitments for sanitation workers. So again, IPA, I think, we were expecting it to be like a really quick 500,000 people type of initiative. We had 45 partners that came in and supported a wide variety of interventions. I want to spend just maybe 2 minutes on this, and I quickly then want to get to the learnings. Even before we ran these two platforms, we had actually set up a WASH platform along with the Gates Foundation. And the intent was actually to focus not just on sanitation, but on fecal sludge management. And when we started the partnership, we said, and this was a corporate platform for FSM. We were like, look, there's no way that we're getting companies to understand or even invest in FSM, right? And in the last few years, we actually met most of our targets. And I think this would not have been possible if we didn't have very strong knowledge partners and execution partners, which were really part of the NFSSM Alliance. And so I think the reason for sort of talking about all of this, and we did 4 parts, but FSM and sanitation workers, which are areas which were severely underinvested, we were able to raise a disproportionate amount of money for these two.